So, welcome back to week one, part two of our lecture series from our Parenting Today course. We're going to shift our focus a bit now and talk about changes in United States parenting over time. I'm going to do that by starting off looking at some demographics here. The birth rate has declined from 4.1 in 1900 to 1.9 in 1990, and this is largely due to women working as well as birth control. We also want to keep in mind that people are living 30 years longer than a century ago, and 25 of these 30 years is due to better public health measures such as sanitation, pollution control, vaccines, and water treatment, and 50 of the 30 years is due to advances in medicine. We have here up on the screen is a visual representation or description of statistics here. These are population pyramids. The one on the left is representing the year 1990, and the one on your right is representing the year 2050, which is obviously a projection since we're only in the year 2016 now. Again, the one on the right is a projected projection of what our population is going to look like today based on current trends that we're seeing. Things to notice as we look at that previous slide, there are more older people predicted to be in the future and also represented today in modern society. Fewer younger people than before, so it makes that pyramid that we were looking at look more like a rectangle. So what are the implications of these changing demographics on parenting? These are things that we want to think about as we journey together, throughout this course. What are the implications of our changing demographics and population on retirement, workforce issues, subsidizing old age, right? Now that we have people living such longer lives, how are we going to be able to pay to care for older people who may no longer be in the workforce? Or are people going to have to remain in the workforce longer in order to be able to pay their bills, right? And what does that mean for younger people that may just be graduating? What does that mean in terms of them being able to secure employment? Healthcare, we want to look at the implications of an extended lifespan on healthcare, caregiving. And what do you think, taking a moment to pause and reflect, what do you think are the other implications of changing demographics on parenting? There have been also changes in the family structure, in particular here in the United States over time. When we think about the 19th century here in the United States, we were basically an agricultural society or an agrarian society, predominantly living together in extended families, in a family form, working together, combining our resources to work together, living collectively. And then there was a shift in the nuclear. It became more of a nuclear family. And when I say nuclear family, that's primarily a family that consists of one or more parents living together with their offspring or children. And this shift to a nuclear family came about largely as a result of industrialization and urbanization. So it took place from the late 1800s and lasted until the 1970s. So you definitely want to remember this slide, put a circle or star around it, either on paper or in your mind, because you're going to see a quiz question that directly relates to this particular slide. And it's going to give you a year, and you're going to have to identify, is this a nuclear family? So you want to pay particular attention at the dates here. And again, drawing your attention to that, the rise of the nuclear family, the nuclear family overall was most predominant from the late 1800s up until the 1970s. So the modern family, that's largely was guided in by the feminist movement. It can also be traced back to secularism. The modern family began in the 1970s and still lasts up until the present day. The modern family hallmark is having dual career families. For most families in the United States, it takes more than one income in order to be able to pay household bills and really to be able to prosper and thrive. And we talk about the modern family. The modern family is also comprised of unmarried parents. We do know that in the year 2015, upwards of 40% of children that were born to unmarried parents. A modern family is also comprised by single parent and step families, as well as gay parents, bisexual parents, transgendered parents. So these are also important trends to remember when we talk about the modern family. Also, another concept that we want to keep in mind is multi-generational families. And this is something in the 1990s, we noticed a shift in the literature, as well as an overall shift in society, whereas young families needed economic and social support from grandparents, in order to survive and thrive in the environment. And nearly 8 million grandchildren are being raised by grandparents either part-time or full-time. And that can be due to a variety of factors, such as working parents. Another fact that we want to keep in mind when we talk about multi-generational families is the fact that over 2 million grandchildren are in the legal custody of their grandparents. And that can be due to a variety of reasons, which include, but are not limited to, economic reasons, parents being unable to economically or financially provide for the children. Can also be due to, mental health or substance abuse issues related to the biological parent. We also want to think about parenting across generations. There's other things we want to consider. And despite differences, attachment to parents seems to be the same across generations, from ancient to modern times. And going forward in the quiz, in the course rather, we're going to be focusing a lot of our attention to different attachment theories. And that's something that will be really be helpful to keep in mind in terms of parenting. Attachment is something that's so important to consider. One major difference when we talk about parenting across generations is that Generation X women have higher occupational aspirations than their mothers or opposite sex peers. We're going to shift our focus just a bit and talk about theoretical perspectives on developmental or development and parenting. So we're going to talk about parenting and nature. We have here on the slide a depiction of a baby elephant just being surrounded by various adult elephants. And, we can glean a lot from this particular graphic or picture, right? We see that this baby elephant is really being protected or sheltered by a tribe of older elephants. And in this particular picture, it's important to remember, I know many of you may remember this from National Geographic episodes, but up until the age of approximate 2 to 3 years of age, a baby elephant is utterly and completely dependent on his or her mother or a surrogate adult for food, as well as for basic comfort and shelter and all those kinds of things. We also want to remember when we talk about elephants is that typically female elephants will remain with their tribe or their families throughout an entire lifetime, whereas elephants rather, starting around the age of 5, what they'll do is they tend to go off, they develop their independence, and they may join another elephant family. So very different from human species, right? Humans are a little bit more complex, and that can be really depicted or shown by genetics. We talk about parenting in nature and genetics. If you remember back from biology classes that you may have taken in the past or maybe taking in the future or even right now, genetics points to the fact that there are between 20 to 25,000 genes in the human genome. And so many of those genes, it's our destiny is not completely shaped by our genes, right? The environment or nurture plays such an important role. So how much of behavior is determined by genetics? If we look at twin studies, they show us that heritability between parent and child is between 30 to 60%. And some of these characteristics have a strong genetic component. For example, intelligence can be strengthened or weakened by the environment. And some characteristics may be the result of genetic abnormalities that may or may not be amenable to change. For example, sociopathy. Some abnormal behaviors may emerge because of environmental factors in the absence of genetic predisposition. And an example of that is domestic violence. It's really important as we talk about parenting and nature, we talk about the human brain and how different parenting styles can actually affect brain development. When we talk about the brain, we want to remember the neocortex, and the graphic slide is pointing right there to the neocortex in blue. That's that rational or thinking brain, and includes the prefrontal cortex, which is actually the last part of the brain to develop. In most humans, the prefrontal cortex is not actually fully formed or fully developed until the age of 25 years. And so that's 25 years of age. So most people in the United States are actually obtaining a driver's license before their prefrontal cortex is formed. And that prefrontal cortex is a really important part of the brain that is responsible for rational decision making, as well as being able to really mitigate emotion, being able to regulate information, higher order information. And then so you look at that orange line, that's really representing or drawing our attention to that limbic brain, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for emotion or feeling. And then we have the red arrow here pointing to that reptilian brain, or that instinctual or dinosaur brain. So that's that part of our brain that is really sort of scanning the environment for all types of danger. And it's not really involved with higher order thinking processes such as decision making or rationalization. It's really that part of the brain that has been inherited from the dinosaurs, right? So it's extremely primitive in terms of its functioning here. We look back at the brain here, we think of language and executive functions. So that's encompassing working memory, attention, planfulness, mental control, and flexibility. And this picture of the brain here has the different areas of the brain where memory is housed, where intelligence, judgment, and behavior is housed, again, pointing to that area of the prefrontal cortex. And also the language area, that particular purple area of the brain right there. It's represented by language, more specifically is known as Broca's area. We talk about parenting and nature. An underdeveloped brain is required in order for babies to pass through the birth canal. It necessitates a longer period of parenting. Stronger parenting is a result of delayed reproduction, fewer children, more investment in children, and better chances of survival. And when we look at poor parenting, we look at earlier puberty, earlier reproduction, more children, less resources, less investment in raising children. So that concludes part 2 lecture. We're going to reconvene and I'll meet you in a moment. We'll move on to part 3 of week 1.